Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Oxford University Press. It's been written by Richard Susskind. He'll be known to many of you, and I have actually reviewed his works in the past. This particular book I think is a very important one for 2017. It's called Tomorrow's Lawyers, with the subtitle An Introduction to Your Future. It's now in a second edition. It's described as an international bestseller, and of course it is very popular as a book. OUP, though, are to be congratulated, I think, for producing this work, because it's certainly a book which will give you some ideas about where we are going at the moment with the legal profession itself and what is to be expected of lawyers in future and the way in which the profession will go. Let's have a look at the book. It's a paperback, very small book, very cheap. There's the spine, and then you probably can't see anything on the back because of the way it's printed. But the book itself runs to 200 pages. There's an index at the back with page numbering. At the front you've got the standard first page there. Then you've got detail from OUP, and there's a very nice dedication which I'll just leave you to read there. I think the dedications are very important. Do read the preface to the new edition, because Richard has set out some changes that have taken place. He wrote this particular piece in October 2016, and in fact I've taken a little bit of it for the review. Then the preface to the first edition sets out what he was going for in June 2012. And then you've got a structure. He's got a quote. Alexander Graham Bell, in fact it's on the back as well. When one door closes, another door opens, but we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the ones which open for us. Very good point, that. Now, it's structured in this way. There are three parts to it. A total of 18 chapters, with artificial intelligence being the very last one. Then there's an introduction, which is worth again reading, and then you get into the book itself. Radical change in the legal market, the three drivers of change, which is the basic principle that he opened up in his first edition. Just opening it in the middle. A global elite, you see. So he's looking at all of, he's got all the right words, all the right words for 2017. And of course this is an important book because we are at a crossroad. We have Brexit, we have a whole range of other things happening at the moment, and that's one of the reasons why I think this book is a fundamental read for anyone who is proposing to become a lawyer today, because it's not just about the job of giving legal advice, it's all the other things that go with the way we dispatch our business, and I think that's part and parcel of what tomorrow's lawyers are going to have to look at. So what do we say about the book? Well, Elizabeth and I talked about the book. We've been to a number of presentations recently about this subject up in London. Now, the actual book review title I've given it for this particular edition is An Understatement of What Real Problems the Legal World Must Face with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that's really my theme throughout the whole of this review. Because what we say here is that crystal balls have often been used as a spurious way to predict or explain things we know little about. And so it is here with Professor Richard Susskind's brave and excellent new edition of the international bestseller Tomorrow's Lawyers from OUP, which he ominously subtitles An Introduction to Your Future. Now, some will say, what future? Although we feel Susskind does a rare balancing act between the realities of the future and what we will probably face in the next decade with this revised edition since the original appeared in 2013. Now, Tomorrow's Lawyers is about prediction in a very changeable legal world at this crossroad as the pace accelerates. It's only 4 years since the first out-of-date edition appears, and much has happened since then. The real obstacle, of course, remains that the legal profession is quite conservative with a small c and does not like change. A great example is the continued reliance on the fax machine, for instance, and the checkbook, which most businesses have already moved on from. Because they've had to embrace new technology. Even at the bar we have to. We pay through direct cash, bank transfers and so forth. We don't use cheques that much, and we certainly don't use the fax because it's been superseded by email, although you wouldn't believe it when you deal with some firms of solicitors. So you can see the problem. It's again one probably of attitude, and well, we've done that way in the past, we're not going to change. If anything then, Susskind may find that his vision of the future is also somewhat conservative with a small c. We don't want to spoil this book for the readers, so I don't intend to set out his details in any great shape or form, because his views are there and you want to read them for yourselves. But all members of the legal profession and those thinking of joining should read the book very carefully, because the subject matter will not be going away from any of us. And as I say, tomorrow's lawyers, it's not just about the content of your legal knowledge, it's about the way you conduct yourself professionally, and I think that's something we've all got to reflect upon. We found the first three parts most helpful, where Susskind looks firstly at the radical changes in the legal market, his three drivers revisited, then a new landscape, and finally, most importantly, prospects for young lawyers. The final chapter, chapter 18, concludes with the most devastating issue, as I see it, of them all, which is artificial intelligence, AI, and the long term, almost certain to be the subject of detailed future research, I would have thought. As the whole of AI takes over, I think it's totally underestimated, and it's something we've really got to come to terms with much more quickly. The word devastating is used with care following the effects of Brexit on every piece of UK business. What could be a sharper pace for the development of AI, with the massive consequent job losses which look inevitable, is certainly something we should be identifying and trying to deal with even now. And what remains shocking is the maintenance by many lawyers of restrictive practices, the status quo, based on a redundant understanding of how we conduct future legal business. The classic examples are that unfortunately there are lots of jobs, and the Bar Council have raised this as well recently. There are lots of jobs, for instance outdoor clerking, paralegaling and so forth, which don't need to be done the way they have been done and can be done by a machine. And clearly a lot of legal work can be, as long as the programs are correctly structured and so forth. There is therefore the possibility of a downturn in career prospects. In other words, a limiting. Now, Susskind writes that in the long run, the changes that I anticipate for lawyers and the administration of justice will be pervasive, irreversible and transformational. And he adds, I'm not suggesting that this means the legal sector will be turned on its head over the next 3 to 6 months, but he says, I'm confident we will see many fundamental shifts as we move into the 2020s. And I'm quite clear that that's the case, because in the intervening 4 or 5 years since the last edition, there have been an awful lot of things happening, like 2 general elections to start with and a referendum. We keep the best bit, of course, for last, when Susskind refers to 2036, which will be mid-career for young lawyers now in 2017. He says, it is neither hyperbolic nor fanciful to expect that the legal profession will have changed beyond recognition. You have been warned. Now, I agree entirely with what he says here, because when I reflect back to when I first wished to be a barrister, which was in 1970, and when I was called to the bar many years later, in fact in 1991 was my call day, you can see the huge amount of change between that period of time and then between when I did bar school 1990 and the changes in up to 2020. So you can see even now the spread of change has been quite substantial. Now, on online courts, which is an area I'm very much involved in, Susskind, who's a regular speaker at the bar conferences and will be coming, I believe, to the 2017 event in November 2017, he says, I remain resolutely of the view that online courts will bring 2 great benefits: greater access to justice and substantial cost savings, both for individual litigants as well as for the court system. Yes, quite so. Now, the point I would make is that, again, the Ministry of Justice have got to start looking at this through HM Courts and Tribunal Service. various other organisations, they've really got to start looking at this in a rather different way from the way it's being looked at. It's been a really slow plod, and we've really got to smarten our pace a bit. Let me conclude by saying this. He says, in a decade we will look back and wonder why we didn't introduce them sooner. Tell the Bar Council, Law Society, that one, and get them to read Tomorrow's Lawyers is our advice, because Susskind's follow-up editions to this work will, I think, be very useful, because it is a work in progress against much, frankly, Luddite opposition. So watch this space. Now, the publication date for the second edition is 2017. I do actually, as you probably gather, agree with a lot of what he says. Not everything, of course, at all, but I think that by producing this book, he is making us think about what we're going to be doing in the future. I rather like this bit, just opening the collaborative spirit. You see, one of the things you'd better bear in mind is team, that, for instance, strategies for GCs, General Counsel. You've got, and the timings of the changes. We've got to realise that with the changes, we're all in this together, to use a very unfortunate previous phrase from certain people, Osborne and Cameron. The fact of the matter is that we are all in this together, and we've got to pull through. And if we don't, we will be left by the sidelines. It's as simple as that. Do read this book. A very great thank you to Richard Susskind, who I have had the pleasure to meet and talk about some of his works in the past. I'm very grateful to you for producing this work. I think it's a very important work at this time. Please, anybody who wishes for a career in the law, you must read this book. It should be in the libraries, and you should be able to get hold of a copy from Oxford University Press. Thank you to all anyway. Bye-bye.